I'm not clean. I haven't shaved in a while. My hair's all locked up. I don't know why it's fun when it gets miserable and painful and sucky.
Hey, investor. Welcome to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. I am so excited about our guest today. I know I say that a lot, but this one is really different than anybody else that we've ever interviewed. We have Nick Fowler. Nick has done the fastest known time on several long hiking trails. So we came across him when we were hiking the Arizona Trail as a family, and he was ahead of us and basically sending information back on our Arizona Trail Facebook group about his progress. And he was out there snowshoeing through the Grand Canyon and snowshoeing out of Arizona to get to the Utah border. The Grand Canyon was actually closed that year because there was so much snowfall that he was the only one who was able to make it through before they decided to close it down for the season. And that's why our family had to do this crazy side trail that was extremely difficult. And that whole episode ended up being so nerve-wracking. And so I really wanted to reach out to Nick because I was hearing about people talking about how he was going and doing all these long trails because he was living on passive income. And I said, this is exactly the kind of guy having a passive income adventure that I want to interview. But I couldn't get a hold of him for a couple months. And then one day I see that he is on Facebook doing the fastest known time on the Pacific Crest Trail. That goes from Mexico to Canada through California, Oregon, and Washington. And the fastest known time, I think he did it in 50-something days. You're going to have to listen to the podcast to hear more about that. And I just remember sitting back thinking, what could our lives look like if we didn't have to worry about what we were getting paid to do? What would we do if we didn't have to worry about the money? And Nick talks a lot about his drive to go on hikes, his drive to show other people that they can do these things, to teach people how to do it. Because I felt oftentimes like when we were hiking the Arizona Trail that I wasn't accomplishing anything. I wasn't serving anybody, and that I wasn't able to really get out there and make other people's lives better. It almost felt like this selfish endeavor that we had chosen to do as a family. And what I realized as I was hiking on the trail, especially the Arizona Trail Association is a nonprofit that keeps these trails maintained so that people can get out and recreate in the outdoors because it's such an important part of mental health. And I realized that if I wasn't using the trails that the nonprofit organization went to all this effort to maintain, that their mission to serve would be null and void if people felt like, oh, well, hiking isn't really serving anybody. It's serving ourselves, our mental health, and then it takes our ability to help other people off the trail with us when we get back and we restored ourselves to be able to then start thinking about how can I help other people. So Nick really embodies that. And I found the conversation with him to be very educational because we invest in different kinds of things. And so we were able to be teaching each other during the episode different ways that we were able to invest in things so that we could retire early and go on some pretty amazing adventures. So let this story inspire you to think about what your life could be like if you didn't have to worry about money anymore, and inspire you a little bit to say, if I didn't have to worry about money anymore, how can I start doing those things right now that will get me ready, or that I can just start living the dream immediately? Stop procrastinating and stop waiting. And Nick really tells the story of how to go out to get what you want without making excuses and without getting caught up in what other people think about you, just figuring out your best life and going and living it. So thank you for joining us today and enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to another episode of Passive Income Adventures. We've got Nick Fowler on today, and I have been wanting to have you on my show, Nick, for a couple of months now because I was staying with somebody while we were hiking the Arizona Trail. We were right behind you, and we stayed with somebody that you stayed with. And she asked us the question that she asked everybody, like, how can you afford to do this? How can your husband be taking time off work? Your whole family's on the trail. And I told her passive income, and she got very excited. She's like, oh, you need to talk to Nick Fowler. He was just here yesterday or a couple days ago, and he said the same thing, that he is hiking this trail, this long trail, using passive income. And she's like, I don't even know what passive income is, but you're the second person who just told me that. So I was trying to get a hold of you through our Arizona Trail Facebook group and couldn't get through. And then I sent you a message and then nothing. And then I saw a Facebook post, what was it, like a week or two ago? Like, hey, I just finished the Pacific Crest Trail fastest known time. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I haven't been able to get a hold of him. He's been busy out there hiking on passive income. So I'm really glad that we touch base and that I get to talk to you because I think your story is incredible. And I would love to talk about the side of things about what adventures you're doing and then how you're able to pay for them. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Emma, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to know first is kind of like where you started down all of this road, because
it's an unconventional, non-mainstream lifestyle. And a lot of us, when we choose to try to retire early on passive income or do anything that's off the beaten path, there's usually a process that led us to that point where we were able to just be brave and just do something a little bit different, whether that's something that has always been in you or was like a decision, a turning point in your life. Tell us more about where you started and how you ended up where you are doing these cool things.
So I guess it begins like back in high school. Like my dad was a financial advisor, so he kind of instilled some of these concepts in my mind, starting off the bat, and it was easier because I had a clean slate. It's not like I really ever started in debt or anything.
Yeah.
But I know this is a podcast, so you're not gonna be able to see me, but I'm not clean. I haven't shaved in a while. My hair's all locked up, and this is not what I used to look like. In my 20s, I was suit and tie, clean cut, shaved, all business, and I worked with a legal identity theft protection company, doing employee benefits, building up a book of business, getting like once we got out of our first house. We know we had never rented an apartment because I feel like I'm okay with collecting rent, but I don't want to pay rent.
Yeah.
So we bought a foreclosure as our first house, and within 6 months, it was a rental property. We have gone through different various streams of income. I kind of think it's fun. And then once I was 30, I guess we were at the point where we had enough streams of income to where we were like, hey, let's start traveling. And so we went on a year-long road trip to go see every national park, and that's when I realized I hate suits and ties and I would rather be hiker trash. But yeah, so that's where we're at now.
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of people talk about this. I remember being in high school and people would say things like a joke. What do you want to do after you get out of high school? And they're like, oh, I want to make $1 million, put it in the stock market and just live off the dividends. I remember hearing many, many people make jokes about this, but then you actually figured out a way to go and do it by age 30. So can you tell us a little bit more about those streams of income? Because I know one thing we talk about a lot on the show is that you have to have multiple streams of income to make it work. And sometimes I feel like my brand as a commercial real estate investor sometimes clouds the fact that I invest in a lot of things, not just commercial real estate, because you have to be diversified and you have to have multiple streams. Sometimes we're investing for growth, sometimes we're investing for cash flow. And so those competing priorities sometimes take the form of multiple things that we're doing. So can you just walk us through that process a little bit about how you were able to build that up to the point you're like, well, let's take a year off. Let's take forever off.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be forever off.
Yeah.
It was originally only supposed to be 1 year. We just liked it so much that it continued. I guess it's just one piece at a time. I was working a full-time job while building a book of business on the side. We always had that rental property. Then once we started traveling, I didn't want to sell the house, so we just started renting that house out as well. Whenever we live in a house, we also try to have a space of that house that can be rented out as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Exactly.
in our previous house, we had a garage apartment. In our current house, the basement, we rent out as an Airbnb. We have storage rental units, collect a percentage from a used car lot. I used to have a truck rental. There's dividends, royalties. I used to have a vending machine route, but that turned out to be not passive enough. It was profitable for a year or two, and then sold that and ended up getting an old Volkswagen bus instead.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like you did a lot of real estate. Have you been able to create any passive streams of income through some more traditional, like you said, your dad was a financial advisor, through like stock dividends, any kinds of things like that? Or you're like, and if not, why not? Because I don't personally have any dividend paying stocks. It's something we do more for long term, just set it and forget it type of stuff. But where do you fall in with some of those more traditional investments?
I don't really live off of any of the dividends. I would rather that just continue to compound. So I don't really think about that. That's just like a little side. It's kind of like I have a bucket for we sit it and forget it, and you're not really going to think about that until retirement. And I've got another bucket. This is what we live off of. And then another bucket. This is earning income so that we can reinvest that into different profitable.
Okay, so that's the same thing I was talking about before a little bit with having to figure out like these competing priorities, because you've got like retirement later in life, but you're kind of retired now. And so but you can't get at those retirement accounts because until you're like 59 and a half without heavy penalties. And so you have different, I love how you use the term buckets, because I actually have a graphic that I make where it's like how you're figuring out which money to put in which bucket so you can be diversified and figuring out how much do I need to have to retire? How much do I have right now? How do I grow that? How is some passive, some active, and just thinking about the different kinds of things that we invest in. So we're actually learning this firsthand ourselves, because when my husband left his job last November, and we're much older than you are, so we had a couple of kids in tow, we got an RV and started traveling. And so the first thing we did was backpack the Arizona Trail. And then we thought, oh, well, same kind of thing. We're going to keep going. We want to move to Florida. Kids hate hiking. And my little daughter, she's like, I want to see every national park. And we're like, let's get an RV and see if we can make that happen. And we're going to Florida because they want to do the whole Disney thing. And so we've had to really shift our investing from thinking about like retiring someday and 5 years from now to retiring like right now, because he was laid off. And it was this decision where it was like, okay, we're either doing this right now or we got to get another job and do this for another year or two. And so we just decided, let's just go for it. But our portfolio was poised in such that we had a lot of equity and we were investing for growth. But then we all of a sudden had to turn and say, okay, now we got to have cash flow. And so we've really just changed up our investing profile over the last year to say, okay, we're gonna focus on things that actually pay out instead of just growing, because you can have investments that do both, but to find one that does both is kind of a unicorn. And so we had to find that we really just have to split the difference between some growth investing and some cash flow investing so that we can keep funding the adventure. So we're actually at my friend's RV park because it's commercial real estate, and he reached out to us last year and asked if we wanted to invest in his RV parks. So we're just happening to be driving through. I said, is this your RV park? Because I recognize the name. And he said, yeah, pull in and check it out. So we're actually recording the podcast from his commercial property. I don't even think he's been here. So I'm taking some videos for him. Those are the kinds of things that we've been doing to try and build more income. I do have some single family houses, and I think those cash flow first and they cash flow fastest, and they do grow in appreciation. But I find that the commercial tends to grow more over time. And then things like hard money loans or private lending has more cash flow. And so what have you found if you could go back and do it all over again, what have you found the types of things that you're like, oh, if I could start over, I would have just done this earlier, or I wouldn't have bothered with that? What kind of wisdom can you give us who are looking at expanding into different streams of income? Because I have some that you don't have and you have some that I don't have. And it's always nice to hear what's working for people or what's not working for people, so that when we're trying to add streams, we have some direction there.
Man, that's hard to answer, because if it weren't for everything I've done, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have. So it's
good answer.
There's lots of mistakes along the way, but the mistakes are part of the process of getting to where you're at. I just made some notes because I don't have any hard money loans or private lendings or commercial property. So I'm going to look into those things. But I'm out of everything that I have, probably my favorite thing is honestly the single family rentals. First, your property's appreciating. At the same time, someone else is paying your mortgage. Plus, you're getting some cash flow over the top of that. And then there's so many tax advantages, like left and right.
Yes.
Just from owning a rental property.
Part of the reason that we made the shift, and you tell me where you are in this in your portfolio, because we made the shift into commercial because when I did the math and figured out how many single family properties we'd have to retire at the same level of income that from the 9-to-5 jobs, it was like 50 houses. And if I wanted to live better, it was like 75 to 100 houses. And this is with mortgages on them. If you pay them off, you can have a lot less, like 10 to 20. But with mortgages on them and then start aggressively paying down mortgages, I thought, I don't want to manage a portfolio of 50 houses. And how can I scale this up? And plus, I was running out of money. And I was starting to see some commercial projects that I wanted to do, but I couldn't afford to do them by myself. And so I started talking to friends and family and potential investors to come and invest in projects for me and just splitting them up a little bit more. And what I found that's helped me to do over the last couple of years is really focus in on like my zone and the one thing that I do best, which is putting deals and groups of people together. I don't want to talk to the contractor. I do not want to manage I don't want to be sitting in the meetings. I don't want to be the day-to-day manager. I want to find the resources to put the deals together. And so what it's allowed me to do is really focus while I'm scaling. When my single families, I do everything myself, which is great, like you said, to learn. But I was getting kind of burned out of that. And I didn't know how long I could do that. And I felt like my single families were tying me to geographic locations, and I wanted to get in an RV and travel. So how do you manage that while you're out and about doing your thing?
I guess you could say I focus. I don't have any cheap rental properties.
Mm,
And I think if you rent to a higher dollar client, you're not going to have as many issues.
that's true.
We have one of our rental properties is about 2 hours away,
Mm-hmm.
and I never think about it. Like maybe once every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's other people that have single family rental properties that say it's a headache, but for us, it's not really a headache because we never think about it. It's just mailbox money.
Yeah. buy it right. Do you have a property management company on some of those so it helps you with like vacancies and lease ups and that kind of thing? Or do you guys, is that like the once every 2 years you step in and find a new renter for it?
Yeah. And we never have issues renting. Like it,
Mm.
in fact, we usually have people fighting over. One time we had someone like, it was like a war. Like people were like, I'll pay you more per month. And finally someone was like, what do I got to do? Give you a fruit basket? So we've never had issues renting it. It's super easy.
Yeah. We've got one, it's a 6-bedroom house. And people always say, don't get these larger rentals because people don't want them. They 3-2s rent out, 3-2s. But it was the house that we used to live in. And we were planning on renting out the basement, but we didn't want to finish the basement, and we wanted to go hike the Arizona Trail. So we rented this house out, and it's like you're describing it. It's like a war because who has a 6-bedroom house for rent? So you got a family with 4 kids there or 5 kids, and they're building a house somewhere, and they can't find anywhere to rent. And so we definitely have seen in the higher end stuff and the bigger places, the nicer places, you're getting really high quality tenants, and they tend to really want what you're offering if it's in a nice area and it's a property that's in really good shape versus our super cheap rentals that are just like, it's like a ticking time bomb. I've sold a couple of those even though they were cash flowing well because I just knew that it was a ticking time bomb. Yeah, I was just like, when am I going to get the call that the roof is leaking? I just didn't believe that it had any longevity. So are all of yours like that, or did you learn the hard way, like stay away from the cheap ones like I did?
No, they're all that way. I did have a small studio apartment that I guess that was a hard lesson because that was much cheaper. But I had heard stories of, I don't remember who told me, but someone was like, if you're renting for more than $1,000 per month, you're going to attract a higher client than if you're renting.
That's true. We do the same thing in our multifamily apartments. It's like if something's renting for less than $1,000 or maybe $1,200 a month, it's not only more difficult client base, but what we're finding is that it's also more difficult to predict your numbers because the margins are so much tighter. The markup is smaller, the profit margin is smaller, and so it can throw your calculations off because in a multifamily, multiply every mistake by 50 units or 150 units, and suddenly one small error turns into a huge problem. And so, one small thing in your favor can also turn into a huge benefit because it's multiplied. But it cuts both ways. And so we just found that the nicer the apartments, the more they're renting for, the easier we have to actually predict the returns of the property itself, rather than always been wondering like, why isn't this thing cash flowing like we thought it was going to? So we've kind of learned to stay away from the cheap rentals in apartments too. But honestly, when you're competing against experienced buyers, sometimes you have to start with the stuff that nobody else wants to manage if you just want to get your foot in the door. And I think that's definitely true in our case. We had to buy some yucky stuff and learn how to manage these, like super manhandle these things because nobody else wanted to do them. They're super hands-on. We learned it, and then now we're buying nice stuff. And boy, they're so much easier. So if you can start there, just start there. But we just weren't even able to make competitive offers because they'd look at our track record and be like, you guys might even be offering more money, but we don't think you can close because we don't think you know what you're doing. You can't raise money, you can't get a loan, whatever. And so they would pass up our offers for somebody else. So we just went and bought some crappy stuff that we knew we could get. But okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Fast forward a little bit to, I want to talk about hiking. I know that this is a show about passive income, but I feel like our family just finished the Arizona Trail. Our 11-year-old daughter did the youngest known time on that trail. And my kids hate hiking. Good on them for doing it, right? But they do not want to do it again. And so I was showing them when we were on the trail and you were just ahead of us snowshoeing in Arizona. And they were like, what? Please don't make us do that. So we were basically watching your progress ahead of us and falling farther and farther behind as we were waiting for the snow to melt. And then when I showed them what you were doing on the PCT, they were just like blown away. They're like, man, I'm never hiking again. So how long was it when you guys were doing your every national park tour to kind of figure it out? Let's go do something crazy. Let's go do some long-term hikes. I know you've been at it for a while. I'm taking a little break right now. So walk me through that process of how you got to that point, and then just tell me about your experiences while you were out there. Because the show is not just about passive income. It's about adventures, y'all. If you're not a hiker, maybe fast forward, but this is going to be good, I promise.
I guess you can also correlate some philosophies between the two because my hiking journey has really been figuring it out along the way, failing along the way.
Yes.
Because I never really imagined I'd be setting fastest known time records on the Pacific Crest Trail. Like 4 years ago, when we were on this road trip to see every national park, I think a year into it, I was finally hiking like 15 miles a day. And I thought that was a lot.
Yeah.
And then one day I wanted to touch a couple glaciers with my own hands. I didn't want to just see them. I wanted to touch them. So I thought it was going to be like a 22 or so mile day hike. And this was before I knew how to properly read maps and stuff.
Yeah.
So it ended up being a 32 mile hike. And so I was so sore the next day I couldn't really walk. But then the day after that, I was like, that was amazing.
Mhm.
And so then it was like, ever since then, if it wasn't more than 30 miles a day, I wasn't really interested. And then it just evolved into 50 miles a day.
Yeah, we watched a lot of videos getting ready for the hike, and there were a lot of FKT attempts, the fastest known time attempts that we saw where there was vomiting, a lot of dehydration, a lot of injury, a lot of misery. And so I stopped having my kids watch those because I'm like, we're not doing an FKT. We're just going to saunter along. And then we ran into Jupiter hikes on the trail. We were sitting there having lunch one day, and he comes hiking by and says hi. And I'm like, wait a second, I know this dude. And the kids were watching his videos on like packing, how to pack, and just his Arizona trail hike. And so they were just fascinated because they're the YouTube generation, just fascinated. But then we had to have him stop watching it because some of the hikes looked just so difficult and so miserable that I was like, we're going to curate that out. No, it's going to be great. We're just going to take a little walk every day. They could do 10 miles a day. We were really happy. Physically, the toll that takes on you. One thing that you're like, have a 4-season tent on the Arizona Trail up in the mountains where it's snowing like crazy and snowshoeing through that and then hiking 50 plus miles a day. It's brutal. So how do you do that? What kind of things are because your mental game there is where it's really important. So what are you telling yourself to get through that stuff and the purpose behind why are you putting yourself through that? I really struggle with that. Why are we doing this? I forgot the point when I actually got out there.
I don't know. I just really enjoy it. To me, it's just really fun. I don't know why it's fun when it gets miserable and painful and sucky, because it does get sucky when you're pushing big miles. Like I remember the first day I was snowshoeing on the Arizona Trail, and I'd never snowshoed before. I'd never even worn them. Or I put them on in my living room to make sure they fit my shoes. That was it.
Yeah.
And so like the first day I did like 25 mile snowshoeing, and it kicked my butt. I was like, oh. And it was freezing cold. And I was thinking, the first time up on the Mogollon Rim, when I had like a 7-degree night with a 30-degree quilt, I was like, should I be doing this? Is this stupid? And so I actually thought I was going to quit. So I actually got off trail. And then I had a warm meal, slept in a warm bed. And I was like, that wasn't so bad. That was actually a lot of fun. Let me get back out there. So I really enjoy type 2 fun, pushing yourself to the limit. I believe that we as humans, we're supposed to live life in abundance and go all out and give our best effort in whatever that we're doing, whether it's by building a financial portfolio, whether it's having fun, whether it's whatever your goals are, go all out and don't quit
Don't ever quit on a bad day either. That was the advice we got over and over and over again, because you're going to have bad days, and those are not the days where you make decisions.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that in our case, watching what you're doing and giving trail condition reports back, it started to become less relevant the farther behind we got because the snow started melting. And then the mud reports were coming in from other hikers. And then by the time we got up there, it was pretty dry. And so I feel like it's similar in a lot of other things we're doing. It's like, I want to follow people who are like right ahead of me or just doing something just more than what I'm doing. Because I notice if they're way ahead of me, I either don't understand what they're doing, or sometimes their information is just out of date because maybe that's a 60-year-old who built this great passive income portfolio, but it was before social media and he was raising money in a very different way than I do. And so I found that it's actually easier to just look at what people are doing right ahead of you and sending those reports back. So we ended up, as we went along, trying to just get the most up-to-date information that we could, but at the same time, like keeping an eye out. Oh, look, Nick just finished. He's at the monument. We can do this. As maybe a balance of both is really important. With you being the first one through that year in the snow like that, especially with the Grand Canyon closed because of all the snow melt, nobody was sending you back reports of where the water was and all of that. And so you were almost winging it at that point. Tell me a little bit more about that, because you got yourself into some dangerous situations where you're like, should I be doing this? Like, how did you navigate that?
I mean, yeah, there was no one in front of me. There was no tracks in the snow to follow. There was no trail to see because it was under 3 to 4 feet of snow. On the North Rim, there was like 9 feet of snow.
Oh,
like the entrance station to the Grand Canyon, I could touch the roof. like the peak of the roof. Speed limit signs were nearly buried in snow.
Yeah.
It was just continuous forward progress. I guess a lot of the things that other people think about, I don't think about. I'm just like, just keep moving forward and enjoy it. There's snow. There was one point where because every single water source was underneath snow, and I don't carry a stove because I'm all into ultralight backpacking, and I don't like having to worry about where am I going to get fuel. I don't like slowing down to cook.
Oh, it takes forever.
And then you have to clean up your mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather just hike and see stuff. Once I was on the north rim of the Grand Canyon and there was no water, I would have to put snow in my water bottles and wait for the snow to melt. And so I just made sure I never ran out of water in my water bottles. That way there was always some water to help melt some of the snow.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Were you having to put it inside your jacket, or was it just inside your tent warm enough that you could start to melt it? Or how did you do that without giving yourself hypothermia by having it inside your coat?
My body stays fairly hot if I'm moving fast.
Mm-hmm.
I was never even wearing my coat when I was hiking, but it was too cold at night. Like it was below freezing. So basically in the morning, as soon as I'd wake up, like before the sun even got up, I'd be like, I need to start moving to get warm and to make sure that I can have water.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just part of it.
And that was some difficult for my kids to understand, because when we woke up in the mornings and they would be freezing and they didn't want to get out of their sleeping bags. And then when we finally got them up and out, they wanted to have their jackets on. And we'd be saying, give yourself 10 minutes of moving and you'll want that jacket off. And they didn't believe us. So they'd wear it and we'd stop, pull all the packs off, put the jackets back in the pack. And so they started believing us, and they would just get up in the morning and freeze. So stick their packs on and start walking. And I find that that's how I do everything. I guess it was a big metaphor for life. That's if you get all comfortable and then do something, it's, first of all, you're probably never going to do it because you're waiting to feel comfortable. It's never going to happen. But then sometimes you get started doing something and you're learning stuff and things change and you have to pivot along the way. And so your ability to just watch the people that posted on the Far Out app the year before, was that even helpful? Because they were doing it the year before, and when there was no snow. Or were you finding any help from the app from the year before, the Facebook group from the year before? Or are you just having to just get out there in discomfort, like starting to hike without your jacket on because you know you're not going to want it in 10 minutes, even though you're freezing now? Do you just have to just get out there in discomfort and just figure it out as you went along? Or did you have some wayposts?
It was such a record snow year that there was no comparison. So no, previous notes did not help at all. But I'm also at the point where I'm comfortable going 20 miles without water. So I know if I'm confident and comfortable with my abilities in the wild. I wasn't really worried about it because there've been multiple times where I've gone 20 miles without water. Yeah, it sucks, but it's not going to be the end of the world for me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't recommend that for every.
Yeah, you have to acclimate to it. When we first moved, we lived in Idaho, we moved to Texas, and our first 2 summers were horrifying. But then now we're back in Texas right now, and I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. I've been back in the summers. Your body does physically change when you're exposing it to extreme heat, extreme cold. So I guess you learn how to hike 20 miles without water. If you do it, you get used to it. And like I said, it's not recommended, but people's bodies change when we put them through these types of experiences. Have you noticed any of that acclimation with you? And it happens fast.
The human body is fascinating. Like 5 years ago, I would have never imagined I could do 50 miles a day for 50 days in a row. 5 years ago, I would have never imagined doing 50 miles in one day.
Ever.
But it's just kind of goes back to you never know what you can accomplish in just a handful of years. It's set some goals, break it down into measurable moments, something that you can tackle into bite-sized pieces and just go after it. Don't stop.
That's what you said before about how you miscalculated on the map and you thought it was going to be 20 miles and it ended up being like 30 plus. And the next day you were so sore, right? But then you get up and the next day and 30 miles actually seems like not that big of a deal. Within a couple of days, I know when I started running, the first time I ran around the block and I came home and I was trying not to throw up in the bushes. And the next day I ran around the block and I was fine. And the next day I was running around the block and I thought, I feel pretty good. So I left my little neighborhood and started running down the main street and I got pretty far. I thought 3 days. And I went from running around the block trying not to vomit to, I think I did a 5K on that third day. And it wasn't because I was in better shape. Like my muscles didn't grow that fast. My lung capacity didn't increase that fast. I don't know what it was, but you quickly adapt. Yeah. Yeah. We're not giving anybody advice to hike 20 miles without water, but you get to the point where you start adapting and your body starts getting used to what you're asking of it.
I'd agree.
At one point, we posted a picture on Facebook of our family under the Grandview Tower sign, and there was no snow, right? We're reaching up, we were trying to hit the sign, but our fingers weren't quite touching the tips. And then you responded and you had a picture of yourself like holding the sign, or I can't remember exactly, because you're standing on such a huge snowpack and you were wearing shorts. Did you hike the whole thing in shorts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, tell me how that decision came around. It was just like, because once you're moving, when you're putting on that kind of miles, you just get hot.
Yeah. I did end up picking up a pair of pants once I got to Flagstaff,
Mm-hmm.
just because it was going to be so much colder at night. And so I wanted to have, not only had a 30-degree quilt, so it was just extra warmth to sleep in. But yeah, when I'm moving, like I only want shorts and a sun hoodie.
Mm-hmm. Or no shorts. No shorts.
Yeah, that
Who needs
actually
shorts?
works sometimes. I had to do that on the Pacific Northwest Trail. I'm not kidding. I was chafing so bad and I was trying to set an FKT, so I had to take my clothes off.
Yep. What's it like, hike naked day in June or something like that? And you're like, who needs to wait for hike naked day? Just, it's like a pressure that we're putting on our bodies that I don't think we recognize until we get going. Even our trekking poles, chafing like the web of our thumb. I wasn't really thinking ahead of having that. So we did have gloves, like sun gloves on, with had leather in there, and it was still chafing through it. So just such a little thing when you do it over and over again, it gets to you. Like you can't let some of those things that you would normally let go in regular life suddenly become a really big deal. And you have everything distilled down to the most basic, like you're not carrying a stove because it takes too much time to boil water and then you're running out of fuel. And it's so much easier. My kids were just like, can we just eat a Cliff Bar and just peel the wrapper off and keep going?
I actually took a stove on the Arizona Trail and the Hayduke Trail this year because I knew I was going to be doing those trails slower. I was like, I'm comfort. In fact, the Arizona Trail was an ankle recovery hike for me. I wore an ankle brace every day and I was trying to go slow and rehab my ankle for the Pacific Crest Trail this summer. I knew I was going to go slow, and so I was like, I'm going to take a stove to enjoy it, but I never used it once.
Yeah.
And so now I've proven to myself that I don't like stoves.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of what we call packing our fears. We had a scary thing, like on the second night we were out on trail, we thought that our water filters had frozen. But since we packed extra water filters, we were able to just use the extra one. And I'm like, why are we carrying around extra water filters? If we think it's frozen, let's just do the other ways of purifying this water until we get to the next stop and we can buy a new filter. And so just those little things, it's just in case our filter freezes, we're going to carry all these extra filters. We ended up carrying more than we needed because we had been on our shakedown hikes, had stuff happen to us that were like, oh yeah, I don't want that to happen on trail. And so we ended up overpacking or bringing a stove because you think you might want it. And then you really distill down like what is most important and you ditch that stuff. So what stuff did you have on the Arizona Trail because you were going slower? You weren't planning a fastest known time on the AZT, but then when you were planning ahead to try that on the PCT, so how did that look different with what you were bringing with you and the mental game that you brought into it with not just packing physical stuff, but also packing like the different things that you packed on the Arizona Trail that you didn't bring along on the Pacific Crest Trail because you knew that it would slow you down or you just didn't need it? Let's start with the stove. Anything else that you were just like, this is going to slow me down, I don't need it?
Yeah, so the Arizona Trail was one of my first longer through hikes that I was going slow. So I was defining it as a comfort camping hike for me. So I actually did start off with pants. And I started off with like an extra sleeping pad and a couple of other things. I remember when I got to my first resupply town that had a post office, I sent home so much stuff. I was like, comfort camping is for the birds. This is awful. I don't want to carry all this. I mean, it goes back to hike your own hike. Everybody hikes differently. I prefer spending more time on my feet, more time experiencing the trail. I don't really enjoy spending time at camp. If I'm going to be hiking a trail, I want to be hiking the trail. I don't want to be spending all my time in comfort. And if that's the case, I want more comfort while I'm on my feet than when I'm at camp. When I get to camp, it's just for sleeping.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of the stuff that we were carrying was the heaviest. We only used it in camp. Like you carry this backpack around with you all day because you have to sleep somewhere. I just found myself wanting to just dump everything. I like the slack packing idea. One day we slack packed. Somebody came and met us out on the trail with his truck, and he threw all of our stuff in the back of his truck, and we hiked 5 miles without those packs. And then he met up with us, and we all had dinner together. And it was the best 5 miles of my entire life, I think, because we didn't need any of that stuff while we were actually walking. That was stuff that we brought for camp and for sleeping. And
Well, see, that's why I'm such a fan of ultralight stuff, because if I want to be backpacking and to feel like I'm day hiking.
okay,
I mean, if that's the case, like you feel like you're invincible and you can go everywhere. Like that's my base weight with trekking poles is 7.5 pounds. And I feel that's what I took on the PCT. So I was pretty comfortable to go into anything.
yeah, we carry that on day hikes if we have like some emergency gear. It's because by the time we get your puffy coat in there and some, with water, that's what it is. But yeah, so that's I think a lot of the criticisms that that people have of ultralight gear is that it's expensive and it's not durable. And I think that when I first started researching hiking, it was during COVID, and we lived in Utah at the time, and we were hiking around the mountains a lot. And I started thinking about like the Appalachian Trail I learned about back when I was in junior high, and how did they do this with 60-pound packs and all their stuff? And were they shooting squirrels along the way for food? Like, where do you even get water? Because I thought water filters didn't work, and I didn't know anything about it. And so I started researching, oh, this stuff's so expensive and it falls apart. And that's when I really realized, like, hiking can be an expensive sport if you have to keep buying this gear over and over, because the ultralight tent was like 3 times the cost of the nylon tent, and it wore out faster. And so I started thinking, like, okay, this is where the passive income hiking things come along, because you need passive income to be able to take time off and go and do this stuff. But the gear is expensive, and you have to buy it a lot more often.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
the lighter stuff is more expensive, but if you take care of it, the bivy I have, it's a DCF bivy, and I have probably 5,000 miles on it, and it's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. Like my tarp has probably 4,000 miles on it, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, if you take care of it, it's gonna last. But I will say, so I don't use blow up air mattresses anymore
Mm-hmm.
because it's inevitable. They're always going to spring a leak, whether it's in the body or in the valve.
Yeah.
So that's inevitable. So I just use foam pads now, which is lighter weight. They're practically invincible. They're not as comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use a 1 ounce polycro ground sheet underneath my bivy to help protect the DCF on the bottom of my bivy.
Okay.
And so I'm like, if you can just take a little bit extra care of it, it lasts forever.
This is what I love about, I'm thinking of so many metaphors of what you're saying. Like, hiking to me is just like one huge metaphor for life. It's like, how do you take care of the delicate fabric of your DCF equipment? And it's like all these delicate things in your life. When I'm out there hiking, I'm thinking about this stuff constantly, just drawing parallels to my life and this experience that I'm having on the trail and how that's like my life and what I can learn about life by the stuff on the trail. And I think for me, that was probably the biggest thing I got out of it, was all these questions that I actually didn't come up with answers to while we were out there. In fact, I forgot the point of why we were doing this. I just did it because I thought it would be cool to finish something like that. But once I got out there, I felt like I'm not really serving anybody. I'm not really helping anybody. I'm not really producing anything. And I was just really struggling with the point. But then when I got done, I thought, I have all these new questions in my life from these metaphors that I've been drawing all along the trail, that now I get to go out and answer all these new questions that I didn't even have before I did this trail. So what have you gained from these experiences from a life and mindset perspective?
I mean, that's a deep question. I feel like I'd want to think about that for a while to give a proper answer. Because I feel like if I answer that right now, it's just going to be the first thing that pops off my head, which I have no idea.
Well, fortunately, you wrote a book. Is that coming out anytime soon where you have more time to just, because I agree with you. It's like people ask me, like, what's the number one thing? And I just do the first thing and pops into my head, and it's not actually the number one thing, because that usually takes a lot deeper reflection. So what kind of have you learned from this book that you've been putting together, like some of those aha moments that you had? Maybe not the number one, because it's hard to do that on the spot, but just some things that you were like, I did not know that before I did this.
So I've said I'm a big believer that we should follow our passions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can find a way to make income through our passions, it's not really work, it's more just fun. And over the majority of the US has a job that they hate, and it's not following their passion, and they're absolutely miserable in it. And I think if we had more of the world following their passion, we'd probably have some pretty innovative products out there. And so since I am so passionate and obsessed with outside, I've known for a while that I wanted to make some type of income through being outside.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, I thought I wanted to be a hiking guide. After doing 2 guides, I realized really quickly that that was awful. One,
Yeah, it's like me hiking with my kids.
it's like you're being a babysitter. I like, and no one wants to hike the way I want to hike. I don't want to hike slow. I want to be pushing my boundaries and expanding, not taking a break after 3 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually now I have this book that I'll be launching. The physical book should be out before Thanksgiving. That's my goal, at least I'm promising before the end of the year. But I do have pre-sales up for signed author copies at pntbook.com. And that book is about my Pacific Northwest Trail, fastest known time through hike. And that was actually my very first through hike I ever did. So I go through a lot of different failures and lessons learned the hard way. And I think you've done a great job through this conversation of tying in metaphors between hiking and in real life. And I think philosophies, whatever our philosophies are, they bleed into every area of our life, whether it's our finances, the way that we handle our family,
Yes.
the way that we go out venturing. And I just think that we should go all out, put our best effort forward. And the more I hike, the more I realize my body's capable of more. And I'm curious to know what else I can do.
Yes. Oh, there's so much to unpack in that, because we could take that a lot of different directions. I have so many thoughts as you're talking. I'm gonna give maybe a TMI example here of when I was having kids, and the first time I decided I was going to do this without painkiller because I had such problems with the epidurals, and if I didn't need painkiller, I might as well just stay at home because I like my own bed better. The first home birth, and I came out of that feeling like just this extreme sense of power. It wasn't a great birth. There were some issues and I didn't handle it as well as I was going to be a warrior. And there was a lot of crying and right. But coming out of that and being like, the reason why we feel so powerful after we do these things is not because we handled it so well. It's because we did it, even though it was so hard. It's like you said, you're out there on the trail and you're freezing. You're wondering if this is a good idea. And you come out of it and you're like, that was really difficult. But look what I just accomplished. Right. And just saying, learning that power and just going all out after that, following your passions. And I think that I'm going to add to that, following your passion that has some kind of marketplace value. I think that what passive income has done for me is it's allowed me to follow my passion on things that don't pay very well. Because now I don't have to worry about what pays well because I found something I was passionate enough about that really had a great market value. And now I get to go chase down stuff that I don't have to make money from it. I just do it because I feel really passionate about it. And that's what's really unlocked for me. I don't know if it sounds like you found that same freedom because now you're like, yeah, I still want to make an income, but hiking guides, you're not going to be a millionaire, but you don't.
Well, I'm not passive.
Yeah,
That's the other frustrating part about it. I was like, okay, yeah, this is like some decent money up front, but I'm back to trading time for money. And if I'm going to be out in the wilderness, I want to do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people want to hike the way we want to hike. We didn't set out trying to do the youngest known time. I actually thought, because the Appalachian Trail, the youngest known time was like a 5-year-old, I think, 5 or 6-year-old. And I wasn't even thinking about that. But about halfway through, they're like, oh, your kid's the youngest kid to ever do this trail. And I was like, oh, it's on now. Like,
we're finishing now.
And I had to bribe her with an iPad and all sorts. So I dragged that kid through this trail. And she's 11. She turned 11 on the trail. So she started at 10. She had her birthday actually at Q's house in Kearney. So they threw her a little birthday party. And yeah, they really went all out to make the day special for her. And I think that's just a perfect example of she's not doing this because she's getting paid. She's doing this because she feels passionate about helping people and serving people. And I asked her while we were there, I said, like, hikers, we're pretty self-sufficient, independent people. Most of us are coming from some sort of financial security, which is why we're out here. You have the guys who are living like hiker box to hiker box and just trying, they're out there because they can't afford a house or whatever. But I noticed a lot of us out there had some means behind us to allow us to do this. And I said, so you're like helping us, but I don't know, I feel bad. Like I feel guilty, like almost to even accept the help. If it makes you feel better, you come pay something for it. So we gave him a little something, right, to help cover some of our costs. But she's not out there doing it for the money. And it's just a perfect example of doing something you're passionate about just because you want to. And then, like you said, then it's fun. It's not passive, but it's fun. And we can because we can afford it. So maybe that's the biggest thing I walked away with. I was like, what do I want to spend the next couple of years of my life doing? So tell me about that, where I asked you right when you first got back, I'm like, what are you up to? Is it too soon to ask what your next adventure is? And you're like, yes. I think I'm going to take him in there.
I'm definitely in a resting period right now. I have a to-do list that's been growing over the last 2 years that I've been pushing off some maintenance and been neglecting some assets so I could focus on the Pacific Crest Trail. Like the Arizona Trail, yeah, I wanted to hike the Arizona Trail, the Haiti Trail. I think it's beautiful. I wanted to hike it. But literally, pretty much everything I've been doing the last 2 years was in preparation for breaking the Pacific Crest Trail record. But with that being said, like my biggest goal for the last 2.5 years has been the Pacific Crest Trail. Now that I've accomplished that, my neighbor asked me if I was retiring from FKTs. I don't think I am.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's way too fun. I'm curious. I'm not going to say what trails I'm curious about, but there are a couple trails that I'm real curious to know if I could do 60 miles a day on.
That's a lot. That's a lot of, especially mountainous trail, like a rugged, it's a lot. I think it took us 14, maybe 16 hours to do the last 6 miles of the Grand Canyon because we had to take the old Bright Angel Trail out.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be rough.
It was terrible. And just because, and now I just took a lot of painkiller. I took like painkiller every 3 hours, like on schedule, so I could get out of there. But when you add obstacles like that, it's just going to take longer. And again, that's another metaphor for life. Yeah, right. I got a lot of nervousness after we got off trail about, okay, how are we going to keep paying for this adventure? Because like I said, we were not investing for cash flow. And so cash was like really irregular payments and the stuff would mature and come in. And we were like, how do we reinvest this for cash flow? We were learning a new skill after we got off the trail. And I still have a lot of anxiety over it. But as far as like post-trail depression, I never got any of that. I was expecting that. It happened to me after I graduated from college and I was like, okay, what's next? What are my next goals? But after the trail, no, I felt like after you give birth and you're just like, I'm a warrior, right? I felt great and really proud of our accomplishment. And people who came up the old Bright Angel Trail after us, because we were the first ones to go through when it was officially open. I know some people went through when it was still technically closed, but we're the first people to go through where we could actually talk about it publicly online and on social media. And people were passing us after the Grand Canyon and saying, oh yeah, thanks so much for posting your old Bright Angel Trail. Like I figured if an 11-year-old could make through, like we could make it through. And so people were passing us afterwards and saying, thanks so much for doing that. But it definitely, I had that cathartic moment on the North Rim and broke down and crying. And because I thought I was going to kill my kids. I was really like, I felt very guilty and just really a lot of self-doubt. And so I think the depression hit like that last 80 miles to the Utah border. It was like, can we just be done? Are we done yet? What are we? I was excited to get on and get on with life. So I think I worked through all that. But even though a lot of us are hiking the trail with some sort of financial backing behind us to be able to afford it, that meant that we're going back to a life where we're not going back to our 9 to 5. We weren't on a sabbatical. We weren't between jobs. We're going back to a life that was pretty cool before the hike. And so it's pretty cool after the hike.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it would be much harder if I had to go back to a 9 to 5.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. I don't think I really even thought about that before, about just the feelings that I was expecting to have that I did not have. Yeah, because we knew we were going on this adventure. We knew we were driving across country and going to do some really fun stuff because the kids had made all these kind of vision board goals over the last few years. And the hike to us was like, you're asking us to do a lot of things and spend a lot of money and basically to live a lifestyle that only spoiled rich kids get to live. And I'm like, I need you to show me that it's important to you because it's important for mom and dad to hike this Arizona Trail. And you guys have to come because you're minors. I'm sorry. So you need to figure out a way to get you through this trail and show us that you can do hard things because then we're going to be much more likely to pay for your fun. Basically is what it boils down to. Because I don't want my kids to be living.
And through hiking and backpacking is probably one of the lesser expensive types of vacations.
True.
That you can do. To me, like I'm extremely frugal and I'm a big believer in increased recurring revenues while decreasing recurring expenses.
Okay.
Make more but spend less. And people look at me and they're like, how do you travel so much? I'm like, dude, you don't realize how cheaply I travel. Now, some of the stuff I do, I realize most of the other people are not going to be okay with. If I'm traveling through a town and it's just me, Hannah's not with me, I would rather sleep in a culvert or under a bridge than pay for a hotel. And I do that often.
Some people look at my lifestyle and they're like, that doesn't sound like very much fun. I'm like, well, you don't have to retire the way that we chose to retire.
Yeah.
Just get to the point where you can retire the way you want to retire and your life will change. And sometimes having some luxuries is nice. We went to Hawaii about, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. We spent as much on 2 weeks in Hawaii as we spent on 3 months on the trail, maybe more. And there were some days that were super cheap, crappy hotels, old stuff, and we're eating at home. And there were other parts of the trip where we really splurged and we spent some bucks on a nice resort and some things like that. And so I feel like just being able to balance, hey, we did something splurgy, and so we're going to make up for that by living frugally, because even though we have passive income, that doesn't mean that we have a private jet. We still have to think about it.
Yeah. No, it's not really about so much about how much you make, but it's about how much you keep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And being able to decide, prioritize what's really, really important to you versus what you're just doing because there's extra money and you can. And I feel like if I spend money on stuff that's not that important to me, I can't have more money to spend on the stuff that's really important to me, because I want to splurge where it matters, and then stuff I don't care about, I'm like, "Mm." And the kids don't like it because what's important to them is
Not what's important to you.
exactly, but I'm the one making the decisions. And so they have had to learn. But it's a good example. They have passive income because they'll invest with us sometimes, and they're like, this money just shows up in my bank account. It's not enough to really live on, but it's totally ruined me. Like, I just want more of that. I said, we have to work to get money in the first place.
They're going to be at such an advantage, though, because they're growing up around passive income. So, like, whenever they are adults on their own, they're going to be starting off on a clean slate, like the good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember my dad borrowed $2,000 from me, I think when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, I think he was just trying to teach me a lesson, because he paid it back with $200 interest.
Oh, nice.
Like a couple months later. And I'm like, that was the easiest $200 I ever made in the life. That was amazing. I want more of that.
I've never thought about doing it that way. Honestly, like what we've done is we found an old mobile home that had been remodeled, and the lady was getting a divorce and she needed to get her cash out of it. She'd put it on a rent to own note. And so I think it was like a $50,000 note over 9 years. And she was offering it to us for like 14 grand. And so I went to all my kids. We have 6 kids, and my adult kids were in college and they didn't have any money, right? So my two teenage daughters had money because they're living at home and working a job, right? So they put their money in, and we went and bought this mobile home together. And every month this money just shows up, right? Or we'll have a hard money loan and they'll be saving up and they'll stick some in with ours, and then we just pay them directly because they're minors, right? But then I have some adult kids who now have their own money, and they'll pool it with ours because they don't have enough to meet the minimums. So sometimes on these private investments, the minimum is like 50 grand. And if you can't meet it, they'll throw in 5 grand or 8 grand or 10 grand or something into ours. And then we just do the math and pay them directly. So yeah, there are a lot of rules around that. So I don't want to get too deep into that because you got to make sure you're following all the rules. I don't want to derail the conversation with that. But yeah, you can definitely get your kids investing with you and thinking about passive income in a different way. But I like I want to borrow money from them and pay them interest. That's a powerful, practical example right in front of you.
Yeah, simple. And simple is usually the best.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I overcomplicate it because they're like, what's hard money? But so what are some of your long-term bucket list items? Can you tell us about, just before we wrap up, because you've had this, I don't want to call it a short-term goal of the FKT there, but like a 2-year goal. What are some of the things that you're looking at in the next 5 to 10 year time horizon? Because like Tony Robbins always says, you underestimate what you can accomplish in 10 years and way overestimate what you can accomplish in a year. So when you take a 2-year goal like an FKT of a long trail like that, and then you actually do it, and you think, okay, what could I accomplish in 10 years? What's on your more long-term vision board or bucket list, whatever you want to call it?
Well, we really like to have like 40 plus acres somewhere in the mountains and have a homestead.
Same.
Grow our own food, be off grid. What's funny is it's like the longer time goes, the more I evolve towards that, versus like in my 20s, my goal, in my early 20s, I wanted to be financially free at the age of 33.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a huge goal, my 10-year goal. I think I had that started when I was 23. So it was a 10-year goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really funny how it evolved from having lots of finances to, I just want to live in the mountains.
Yeah. Your priorities definitely change. We used to have a homestead in Austin, a small, like a 5-acre homestead, and we had our chickens and our goats and growing food and the sheepdogs and the whole 9 yards. And we ended up not doing it because I felt like it was too expensive. I felt like I could go to the farmer's market and get food, like high quality food, cheaper than this. And so we ended up kind of divesting ourselves of all of our livestock. And then that was the house that we sold when we moved to Utah. And that house is what paid for the real estate business. And so on the one hand, we actually drove by the house yesterday in Austin. We were driving through, and I just stood out in the street just looking at it. And I'm like, wish we hadn't sold this house. I loved it so much. And just standing there thinking like, this is what kicked off this entire journey. It's what kicked off my entire, I got to make different choices because you move across country and new jobs and new business and all that. And just standing there and just realizing I want this back, but I won't be able to travel as much, but maybe I can. And trying to reconcile those two different lifestyles.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a huge thing because once we have a homestead, that's going to be much harder to travel.
Yep.
I need to break a bunch of FKTs first.
Yeah, I can knock those out
I
first.
could go hike every trail first.
Oh, I do have some friends. They've been living in their RV full time for, I don't know, like 15 years, right? And they have a homestead where they go and they just do their goats and their chickens and their garden and everything for a year or maybe 2 years. It's still living in their RV, just they have like their own septic tank and everything up there. And then they get antsy again and they just leave. They'll drive away. And then they rent the land out to other people in RVs and they'll get their own chickens and their own goats, right? And live there for a year or two. And so I felt like that was a really good way to balance those two lifestyles. You have a place that you can either afford to leave vacant or you can rent out if you're going to be gone for a long time. And so that's kind of what we're working towards. So what mountains do you want to have your hideaway in? We haven't decided yet.
Probably Utah. We've also thought about northern Arizona or western Wyoming.
Okay.
But Utah's very central. There's so many canyons, southern Utah, and then if you want to bounce up to Montana, it's right there. If you want to go to the Pacific Northwest, it's just very centrally located to the west.
That's true. When we moved to Salt Lake City, we had a lot of people coming through and visiting us who weren't even from there because they were from Seattle or Idaho or Nevada or whatever, and they were passing through a lot. And so we ended up having a lot of people that we'd lost touch with come visit us. So I think we're looking at the same thing. My husband grew up near Yellowstone. I grew up in Seattle. So I love the Flagstaff to Phoenix or because you can have a summer home and a winter home that are like 2 hours apart and they're totally different climates and totally different.
Arizona's amazing. I kind of fell in love with it when I did the Arizona Trail.
Yes. I didn't really like Arizona before the trail. What I was picturing it to be was not what it looked like at all because we're up in the mountains. It's very rugged.
Well, my aunt is in Phoenix and she's like a lizard because she's like, it's 100 degrees. It feels great outside. I'm like, you are insane.
If it's too hot, though, drive up to your extra house in Flagstaff. It's 2 hours. No big deal. Your ears pop a little while you're driving up that elevation, but I think that would be on my bucket list, too, to find a place where I can have a homestead and still be able to travel and then have a second home in that climate. I think St. George and Salt Lake are kind of like that, 4 hours away, or even St. George and Cedar City are totally different weather patterns, and you can be back and forth depending on what you like. So it's a beautiful, beautiful area of the country. And we're moving to Florida, but I think we'll be back.
Actually, you know what? Anybody listening to this podcast, Utah is awful. You do not want to go.
That's true. Utah's.
Go somewhere else.
That's true. Australia. I hear Australia is pretty cool. They have some trails you can FKT too, I'm sure. Not Utah. Utah sucks. When are we going to get a Utah trail, though? That's my thing, is there's stuck in politics. Yeah.
The Hayduke. I mean, it's 800 miles across southern Utah.
It's across Utah the short way. The long
Utah's gross, but it goes through so much. Dude, the Hayduke's the Hayduke. It's like a different planet.
Yeah. Oh.
It hits all big 5 national parks, even dips down into the Grand Canyon for a couple 100 miles.
We did meet some Hayduke hikers while we were hiking the Arizona Trail because it was kind of like across.
There's also the Uinta Highland Trail.
Yeah. We haven't done that one. I'm going to have to wait till my kids all of them become adults because they're like, we're never doing that again. So it's either go by ourselves and we don't know the logistics of that.
Major kudos to them, though. I mean, if they finished an 800-mile trail across Arizona and they were miserable.
Yeah.
Like, what else can they accomplish, you know?
That's true. My 21-year-old son came out and he joined us in Superior for the last 500 miles. And boy, he was like, my 11-year-old sister hikes faster than I do. And he was just miserable, hated it. And we got all done. He said, this is going to look so good on my job resume. I hiked the Grand Canyon rim to rim. I had 500 miles of the trail. I was like, this is the hardest thing you've ever done. He's without doubt. It changes people, whether they are passionate about it or not. It changes because my 21-year-old did not have to be there. He was there by choice and regretted it, but he was really grateful afterwards that he did it.
It gives you the confidence that you can finish something hard.
Mm-hmm. That's probably the lesson for this whole podcast, for this whole hike, for this whole experience, like that you have the ability to dream big and actually get it done. And that mindset, if you don't have that mindset, you don't even start. You don't even bother trying. So to me, that's the biggest thing that I learned because we didn't know if we would finish. If it had been a regular year, we might not have because was not hot.
Oh, it was a lot of people think it was an awful year, but I think it was a great year. I mean, there was plenty of water sources. I never had to carry more than 2 liters at a time on the Arizona Trail. That's unheard of.
Yep. Okay, so let's look at it from that perspective, from the passive income perspective, because I felt like the reason it was so great for us is because we got to take 3 months to hike the thing, and we were just in perpetual spring the whole time. We were just following that leading edge of that cold weather as it melted, and we weren't in a hurry. A lot of the people who thought it was a terrible year would get up to Pine, they're stuck in the snow, stuck in the mud, and like, I got to get back to work, and they would have to bail. But I had always said, if we need to sit around in Pine for 3 weeks or sit around in Flagstaff for 3 weeks waiting for stuff to melt, we will. And I think that's why it was such a great year for us, because there was plenty of water. It wasn't that hot. We had the financial wherewithal that we could sit and wait and stall without worrying about getting back to work or getting back to school or any of that. It's like that. I can see why we had such a great experience on it, but why others would think it was such a bad year. But I don't know if we could have finished on a regular year. Too dangerous, too hot with kids out there like that.
Oh, yeah, the heat is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Say the name of your website again so people know where to find you.
It's pntbook.com. PNT is for Pacific Northwest Trail.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. You guys got to check this out. These are the kind of people, I'm talking to you, the listener right now. Nick, he's the kind of people who goes and does like amazing, crazy stuff that makes your big dreams not look like that big of a deal. And it kind of inspire you like, hey, I can go do this, because people can do amazing things. And you don't actually have to do things the way we're doing it. You just have to get your own dream, your own thing. And if it's a little bit scary, even better, because that means you're doing something pretty cool. And expose yourself, listen to the interviews, read the book, and just think, what could I do if I didn't have to worry about money? And start thinking about life that way, and things will start happening. I promise. 5 years ago, just like you, I would never have said that we could do this. We were lucky to pay our mortgage and have an emergency fund. We took our kids for a hike when we first moved to Utah, and it was a 1 mile hike from a parking lot to a little waterfall. And we have video of them sitting down on the little steps out of the parking lot bawling. And then to think, just a few years later, they finished the Arizona Trail. Just think big, you guys. It happens. It can happen. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Nick. I'm really looking forward to this, and you did not disappoint. I appreciate you coming and sharing your experiences with us.
Do you ever have those heroes in your own industry or in your own hobbies that you're fangirling on a little bit and you really wanted to meet? Well, today was an opportunity for me to get to know Nick Fowler and really feel like he is a part of my network. And I had a chance to ask him so many questions and relive life on the trail with somebody who had been through such a, frankly, an odd experience, spending 3 months or 2 months backpacking across a state on your 2 feet. This was a dream that we had, and it really spurred us on to having our goal of financial freedom so that we could go on this type of long adventure, a long hike like that. And the dedication and the drive that it took to be able to get our financial house in order so that we could go on a trip like that now allows us to sit back and think, all right, now what do we do? And it's about helping people achieve the same financial freedom so that you too can go out, live your best life, and think about how you can serve others. We all have a different passion, and if we work together to build wealth, we can really change the world one person at a time. So thank you for joining us today. Please reach out after the show at partnerwithrise.com. I can't wait to hear about your next passive income adventure.